dear students. Today, we are going to conclude our introduction to Commonwealth literature. So far, we have seen what is Commonwealth nations, what is Commonwealth literature. As a recap, Commonwealth nations are those nations which were once the colonies of British Empire and later given freedom. They formed a union and they named the literature written in English in their countries as Commonwealth literature. This Commonwealth literature is named after different names, is called after different names: New Literature, Post-colonial Literature, Third World Literature, etc. In this lesson, we will look into the writers of the Commonwealth literatures from different nations. Let's get into the class. Commonwealth literature can be grouped under two categories: the literature written in English, where the native language is also English. Examples: Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, where the English is the mother tongue. And there are countries where literature is written in English, but the mother tongue is the other language, whereas the English is used as a second language. Examples: India, Africa, West Indies, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc. So these are the two categories how we subdivide the literature written in English. The Commonwealth literature is also called Third World Literature or Third World Commonwealth Literature. The name was given in the second quarter of 20th century. It was coined by Alfred Sauy, an economist. According to him, the first world nations are Europe and U.S. He groups Soviet Union as the second world nation, and he calls the third world nations the nations which are underdeveloped. So now we can see how the word which was used in 15th century from a Latin republica, and it has changed its meaning slowly. As a Latin word, it means republica, which was meant to represent common people. Later, when Oliver Cromwell used the same word, it meant commonwealth of people. When it was used in 17th century, it represents the state which hold the supreme power. The first half of 20th century, it meant the literatures are the nations which holded the common thing, The common thing is the English language. The colonies of British hold one common thing among them, that is the English language. And the literature written in English language was called Commonwealth Literature. But in the second quarter of the 20th century, this Commonwealth Literature came to be called the Third World Literature because Alfred Sauy, an economist, grouped the nations under three categories. The first category, which comes Europe and U.S. The second category is Soviet Union, and the underdeveloped countries, Third World Literature. So Indian literatures, African literatures come under the underdeveloped nations, so Third World Literature. Now coming to writers, Commonwealth writers, the very famous writers, Indian writers, are Raja Rao, A.K. Ramanujam, Vikaram Seth, Nissim Ezekiel, Jayanta Mahapatra, R.K. Narayan, Anita Desai, Mulkraj Kamala Markandeya, the Nigerian writer Chino Achebe, Old Soyinka, Sri Lankan Ananda K. Joe Ramasamy. The Australian writers are A.D. Hope, Patrick White, Judith Wright, very famous Canadian writer Margaret Atwood, and New Zealand writer Catherine Mansfield. So these are the very famous writers of the Commonwealth literature. We will see the mind map of the entire lecture of Commonwealth literature. So in the next lesson, we will be talking about Old Soyinka, the Lion and the Jewel, with small introduction to Nigerian literature and introduction to Old Soyinka. We will take up the Lion and the Jewel as drama. Let's get into the recap or the mind map of Commonwealth literature. So, if you look into this structure of Commonwealth literature, you can see this Commonwealth nation. The literature, what is Commonwealth nation? The nations which were once the colonies and given freedom by the British Empire are called Commonwealth nations. And this word, Commonwealth word, is a loose translation of the Latin word Republica, which means public wealth. The Commonwealth nations had one thing common to them, which was the English language. And the literature written in Commonwealth came to be called as Commonwealth literature. It also had other names called New Literature, Commonwealth Literature, Post-Colonial Literature. So there are at present 54 nations. Now coming to the headquarters, the detailed headquarters. So the nation has 54 Commonwealth nation at present. The headquarters is in England, and the head of the Commonwealth nation is Queen Elizabeth II. Now this Latin word Republica was first used in 15th century by Oliver Cromwell for a common term, common to represent common, the entire land as a common for people in that meaning. Later in 17th century, it was used to represent the state which holded the power. The first nation which could form these nations, Commonwealth nations, were Australia, Canada, South Africa, and New Zealand. And India joined as a nation in the Commonwealth organization in the year 1950. And the literatures, great writers are producing literature in all the Commonwealth nations, and they are literatures written in English in all these Commonwealth 54 nations are grouped under Commonwealth literature or Third World literature, New literature, Commonwealth literature, etc. Thank you, students. Thank you for watching the lecture. We will meet you in the next lecture with tomorrow. Thank you.